The agenda for today is first, I want to talk about things you can do before you even interview. Then we'll talk about how to answer the interview questions that you get asked. Then, one of the most important things we'll talk about is how to ask good questions to the interviewer. And then we'll talk about closing the sale at the end of the interview. Let's start out by talking about a few things you could do before the interview ever happens. And the first thing that you should do is you definitely want to change your mindset. We're here to talk about how to interview and interview tips and whatnot. But the reality is the first thing you need to do is stop thinking about this as an interview and you treat this like it is a sales call. You are a salesperson and the product that you're selling is yourself, and you're going to close this deal and sell this product to the person that's interviewing you. Not only is this the right mindset for any position, but especially if you're interviewing for a sales job, this is even more critical because you're going to be demonstrating how you might handle a particular prospect. And for example, if you close the interviewer on the position, that's going to demonstrate how you might close a prospect in a sales situation. So it's even more critical than ever to view this as a sales call and treat everything you say and do like you're a salesperson. The other thing that you want to do before the interview is you want to take some time to organize your sales career history. Actually list out all the different years that you've been a salesperson. And for each year, I want you to put down your quota, how much you sold against your quota in terms of your quota attainment. Actually put the numbers down, put down any awards you won, any specific details, because you're going to be asked about this. And if you have this listed out in front of you, not only is it going to make a good impression because you're going to be more prepared, but it's going to prevent you fumbling around. This will make a big improvement. The other thing that you should start to think about and prepare ahead of time is try to think about, if this is not an interview for your first sales position, then obviously you've left previous positions. You want to try to think about, why did I leave, or why should I share as a reason for why I left each position. The reasons why you leave a position will, first of all, you're likely to get asked that, but the reasons why you leave can really tell a story about who you are. Now, obviously you want to have some reasons that spin your reason for leaving in the most positive way. I mean, sometimes you leave because you were laid off or fired, and you don't want to lie about that, but sometimes you can spin that in the most positive way by maybe talking about economic downturns or pandemic or, different reasons. So create the story of why you left each position. You might also want to start to think about and have examples of deals you won, sales you made, also deals you lost. These are good examples that you might get asked about, and it's good to have a story that, again, you can share, but it shines what you did in the best possible way. You might want to have some examples, good and bad, of managers that you've worked for in the past. And those are all just things to organize so that you're ready for any questions that come up. And regarding how to answer interview questions that can come up, in each interview, the questions will be unique. So I can't really tell you exactly what questions to prepare for. Also, your situation is unique. So I cannot also tell you exactly how to answer each question for you. But what I can do is try to help you to keep in mind the picture that you want to paint with each answer. If you have in mind the picture and the story you're trying to tell overall, then that can help you to figure out what to say for each question that comes up. For example, you want to paint a picture that, of course, you're the best person for the job. You know that already. Of course, you want to answer each question so that you stand out from the rest and that they pick you. But another thing that you might want to paint a picture of is that not just are you the best person for them, but you want to paint a picture that their position is exactly the job you're looking for. This is something you might not think about trying to communicate and express and let them know, but to recruit, interview, hire, and onboard a new person in any position, especially sales, is a very taxing, costly thing for a manager to do. The last thing they want to do is have to replace the person they're interviewing sooner than expected. The hope is that the person they hire stays with the company long term. Ideally, the hope for both people, but it's maybe the hope more for the hiring manager than the person that's being interviewed. And because of that, you want to paint a picture that you're committed long-term. You're committed long-term to the position. You're committed long-term to the company. You're not going to get hired and then start looking for promotions internally or start looking externally for other positions. And one of the ways to paint the picture that you're committed long-term is to let them know that the position is perfect for you. It's the exact job that you're looking for. So every answer should be painting this picture. Another thing that you can do is in each answer, you can try to display different qualities and characteristics of that you have as a salesperson or that as a person in general. So again, I can't tell you what to say, but what you say can communicate and show that you have certain qualities. I'm going to show you a list of qualities that you might want to display here. Hopefully some of these you have. If you don't have some of these, maybe those are things you can work on, but for sure in the interview, these are all qualities that you'd want to display if you want to secure the position that you're interviewing for. So the first one is you want to display confidence. This is a sales position you're interviewing for. You don't want to seem insecure or a lack of confidence. Sales managers are looking for confident salespeople to hire. You want to display energy, even if you're maybe a medium to low energy type of person. Me personally, I'm actually a fairly laid back, medium to low energy type of person. When you go on that interview, you need to, drink a cup of coffee or amp it up, because even if you can be a successful salesperson with medium or low energy, sales managers, they're not looking for that. So you want to display high energy. You want to display that you are a hard worker, of course, but you want to also display that you have the ability to learn. You might also not have the exact experience that they're looking for. What's more important than having the exact experience or knowledge is someone with the ability to learn. One of the reasons why a college degree is something that either is worth anything or that people should get or that it helps someone is not because of the information you learned when you were in school. It's that a college degree shows that you have the ability to go through a process to learn information, and that shows a hiring manager that you have the ability to learn. Now, whether you went to college or not, and that's not as important for sales positions, you can at least display that you have the ability to learn. It might only be that you tell them that you have the ability to learn when they're asking questions about you, or if they ask you if you know something or know how to do something, let them know, hey, I don't, but I'm ready to learn. I can learn. I learned these different things in the past. Of course, you want to display that you are a team player. Most likely in a sales position, you're going to be part of a team. You're going to be likely working for the person that you're interviewing with. You're going to have teammates. You want to display that you're a good person, easy to work with. Also, that you might work independently and be a self-starter, that the manager is not always going to have to tell you what to do, that you're going to take initiative and start things and do things. But even with you starting things and doing things and taking the initiative, you are someone that follows rules, stays between the lines, stays according to all the guidelines. So you're independent self-starter, but you're not a wild card that's going to be out there being unpredictable. You want to communicate or display that you have a history of success. That's one of the reasons why they'll ask you about your previous performance, is because they'll try to use your history as an indicator or predictor of the future. So whether or not that comes up when they're talking about your previous sales performance, or whether or not your previous sales performance is a history of success, you want to try to paint that picture and display that. And you could do that through different things, by talking about putting yourself through school or certain achievements, that you are a successful person and that you're ambitious. In a sales position, there are some people that can settle for less and they're okay with less. You don't want to be perceived as that type of person. You want to be perceived as being someone that's ambitious, always striving for more. That's what they're looking for. And that you're driven to succeed. You're driven to be a success. You're driven to hit your targets, hit your goals. You're driven to make a lot of money. Don't be shy about letting them know that you want to make a lot of money and that your goal is to be rich. There's nothing wrong with that. You just don't want that to be your only goal. It's good to be driven by money and to want to make money, especially with a sales position, but you don't necessarily want that to be your only aspiration. Have that be part of other things that you're aspiring for and wanting. All right, we're still talking about how to answer their questions. There are some really common questions that you can prepare for, and you should have answers for these ready to go. So like I said, be prepared for questions about what you sold in certain roles, how you performed, what was your quota attainment? What did you W-2 for particular years? You want to be prepared to answer reasons why you left previous companies or employers. You might be asked, what is your experience with a particular technology or system or industry? Be prepared with answers for that. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? That's a question that could likely come up. What is your greatest strength and weakness? Why are you interested in this role? That goes back to the hiring manager wanting to know, listen, if I hire you, are you going to stick around or am I going to have to replace you? They want to know why you want the job and be prepared to answer that, other than you need a job or you need to make money. Have some answers around, this is the type of challenge I'm looking for. I like this about the company. I like that. What do you know about us? So you want to be prepared to be able to answer questions about them. Before the interview, you might want to research the company, look into how the company is organized in terms of business units, have an understanding of the products that they sell. You don't have to be an expert on them or their industry, but the main thing you want to display with this question is that you've done your research. Other than, you don't want to just act like you showed up for the interview and you were ready to talk about you. In the same way that a salesperson, if you're a salesperson, you shouldn't just show up to a meeting with a prospect not knowing anything about them. You'd want to go look at their website, have an understanding of what they do, what they sell. And so it's the same thing with this. You'd want to have an understanding of the company you're interviewing with. Then, of course, at the end of every interview, the interviewer will ask you, what questions do you have for me? Now, you can anticipate this in almost every interview. And, when you hear this question, you're thinking it's more of a courtesy. Like, okay, they're being nice. They're giving me an opportunity to find out anything. This is a very important question to measure you, because if you're looking at this as more of a courtesy to you, then you might answer with something like, no, I'm okay. No, you've given me a lot of information. What I want you to do is I want you to have a bunch of questions to ask. And that is going to really help you to not only stand out from the competition and other people that you're interviewing, but it's going to help you to communicate that picture you're trying to paint of, I'm the right person and this is the perfect position for me and I'm committed long term because of the questions you ask. So let's jump into how to ask good questions at the end of your interview. Now, I'm going to give you a bunch of questions to ask. I'm actually going to organize these into 3 categories. Now, the 3 categories I organize these into, it's a logical way to organize these questions. I usually ask these in this order that I'm going to share with you. You could mix them up. It's fine. I think it's probably best to ask them in this order. But one of the best things about these categories that I give you is that it's an easy way for you to remember these. And it's an easy way for you to incorporate this without, having to memorize a whole bunch or you do a lot of preparation. Let me give you the 3 categories of questions I recommend you ask. So the first category is you want to ask questions about the company that you're interviewing. We're basically going down a ladder here, climbing down a tree. The next category of questions are questions about the department that you would be working in. And then the third category are questions about the position. So it's a very logical flow here, right? So if you just keep those 3 categories in your mind, it can help you at the end of the interview without having to have some notes in front of you. So let's talk about some things you can ask about the company. First of all, before you go on the interview, do some research about the company. Look for any news or recent events about the company. And you could ask about any recent, for example, let's say that they recently acquired another company. So the interviewer says, do you have any questions for me? Yes, I do have a few questions. First, I was doing some research. I see you guys acquired company XYZ 3 months ago. How's that going? Or how do you think that will impact the company overall or the strategy? So, and another thing you could ask, whether there was an acquisition or a recent event, you could just ask about the strategy short and long term as, what are your thoughts? What knowledge do you have about the short and long term strategy for the company? Yeah, that's a very good question to ask. If you're going to choose them over going to work for somewhere else, not only do you want the employer to know that you're the best person for them, but you should be trying to figure out, are they the best employer for you? Show them that, hey, you're not sure about me. I'm also not sure about you. I'm committed long-term if I decide to work with you. But before I decide that, I want to know more about you. This is showing a curiosity, a level of preparation, a level of sophistication. So ask about the strategy. You could ask how the company compares to the competition. If they compete against company ABC, if I could ask you, I know that ABC is your direct competitor. How do you compare against them? What is your competitive advantage? Then, from a financial standpoint, you might want to ask about the ownership structure for the company. Depending on the type of company you're interviewing with, most likely there's some sort of ownership, whether they're a publicly traded company, whether they're owned by private equity, owner operated. You could ask about the ownership, and that could lead to questions about, okay, do you know if there's a plan to go public? Do you know if there's a plan to go private? So while those are not real critical questions for them to hire you, it really will make a good improvement. By the way, keep in mind, you probably have at most about 10 to 15 minutes to ask questions. So you don't need to ask 30 different questions in each of these categories. You're looking for maybe 2 or 3 would be more than enough. So after you've asked some company questions, you can drill down to the department level. And then this is where you could ask some questions about how the organization is structured. How does this organization fit with other departments? How does this team fit with other departments in the organization? What other departments do you work closely with? You might want to start to ask about the hiring manager. How do you fit in the organization? How would you describe your management style? That's a fair question to ask. You're not basically saying, hey, are you a difficult person? Do people like working for you? You're just saying, hey, what's your style? How do you work with people? It's a very good question to ask, even knowing it might seem a little intimidating or maybe delicate. After you've asked some department questions, then you drill down to talk about the individual position. Obviously at this point in the interview, maybe they've talked a lot about the position that you would be hired for, but maybe they've missed some details. So this is where you can ask some details. Maybe they haven't clearly discussed the objectives. So what are the objectives of this position? How will you measure success for this individual? What is the opportunity for growth in this position? That's a great question. That shows that you're ambitious, that, what am I going to learn here in this position? What could I do if I'm successful in this role? What can be next? Who else will I be working with in this role? And then you could kind of ask them, a question they might have for you is, why should we hire you? A great question that you could ask them is, why should someone choose this position over other sales positions at similar type companies? Get them to sell you on the company, on the position. All right. So if you go through any of those stages and sets of questions, asking 2 or 3 at each level, trust me, you will make a good impression, and likely your competition is not going to go through any type of process like that. The next step, after you've asked your questions, that's usually the end of the interview. Although it's not the end of the interview, because remember, this is not an interview, this is a sales call, and the next step is closing the sale. Now, I'm going to provide some very clear questions and steps you can go through to close the hiring manager at the end of the interview. So we can go through some other categories of questions here. The first category question is trial close questions. Trial close questions are good to ask as a salesperson. If you're showing a product, you might want to a prospect, you might want to ask, what do you think? Is this something you would use? Is this something you were hoping to see? Is it doing what you hoped it would do? Where do we stand? How does everything look? So trial close questions for the hiring manager might be, what do you think of this interview so far? How do you think I compare against the requirements of the position? Is there any reason why you think I am not the right candidate? How do I compare against other candidates that you are considering? If you had to make a decision today, which way would you lean? Great questions, not only to kind of see where you stand so you don't go home and think you have the position, but these are questions that are really going to make a good impression on you as a salesperson as you're interviewing for a sales job. Then we can progress to ask some hard close questions. So what's the next step in the process? Now, of course, you could assume that the next step is that they hire someone or pick someone, but maybe it's not. Maybe they have internal steps that you have to interview with someone else, or there's a screening or whatever. Ask them, what's the next step in the process? That's a great sales question when you're talking to a prospect also. So it's a good question to make a good impression here. Is there anything that will prevent us from moving forward to that next step? What would you like to do next? When can I expect to hear back from you? What is the best way and time for me to follow up with you? So really good hard close questions there. Maybe there are other questions you could add, but that should get you going in the right direction. The next thing that I want to share with you is something that you can create, and that's called a 90-day business plan. This is something you create ahead of time, and you can actually give it to the person that you're interviewing with, and you could either treat it as a leave behind, or you could actually present it to them. Most likely you should give it to them and make them take the decision of whether or not to go through it. They'll just look at it on their own. How firm you want to be on that, you maybe want to be more persuasive to present your 90-day business plan instead of leaving it up to them. That would probably be the harder, more salesy, persuasive thing to do. Let me show you the plan you can create, and I'm just going to put placeholders in here where you can insert some of your information. But so it's a 90-day plan. So basically, the bulk of the plan, and this could be a slide deck or it could be a document, but you could just copy these as the actual slides. So the first slide would be days 1 through 30. So this is the first third of the 90-day plan. And this is where you would, if you're presenting this to them, hey, I'm going to spend a big bulk of the first month on training. And that's going to include me. I'm going to try to learn everything I can about the products and services that I sell. I'm going to take some time to get up to speed on corporate systems and processes. I'm going to try to learn the company sales methodology that you guys are using. I'm going to research the territory that I've been assigned. I'm going to research my current customer base in terms of current customers that are in my territory. And during the first month is when I'm going to start to reach out. So I'm going to start to reach out to more of the friendly individuals, people that know who we are, people we're doing business with. And so I'm going to do current customer outreach. I'm going to contact all of our existing customers over the phone and on email. I'm going to introduce myself as their new point of contact. And I'm going to start to schedule appointments with some of these individuals as appropriate. Then in the second month, the 90 days 31 through 60, this is where I'm going to start to transition to reaching out to some of the more difficult people, being cold outreach to cold prospects. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build my cold outreach attack list of contacts and companies that I'm going after. I'm going to build and start to send cold email campaigns, and I'm going to start to do cold phone prospecting. As part of that, I'm going to start to schedule appointments with cold prospects. And during the second month is where I'll start to host and complete appointments with current customers. And this is where I'll also start to incorporate networking into my prospecting as well. And I'll try to attend 2 networking events per week. And so at this point, this is where my pipeline will start to fill up with qualified leads. And then I'll progress to the third month. And this is where I'll start to close deals from those meetings with current customers in terms of upsells and cross sells. And this is where I'll start to deliver presentations and demonstrations to net new prospects. And my goal at the end of the 90 days is to have my pipeline at least 1x annual quota. So that's kind of the breakdown of the 90 days of what you're going to do and what you're going to focus on. By the way, whether or not they're going to want you to do that exactly, or whether or not there's other stuff they're going to want you to do is not the point. The fact that you've taken the step to prepare this and have thought through this and put this together is going to make a really good impression. But there's still some slides you can include at the end of the 90-day plan, which is a slide on why. And in the brackets here are where you insert your information. So like if this was my 90-day plan, I would put why Michael Halper as the heading. And then this is where I put details and examples of why I'm different from the competition. And then I'm going to list out my strengths. I just copied here those characteristics that you should display. That same list that I displayed earlier, I copied here because and you could just leave this if you want, but what you would ideally do is customize this to what you think you're going to end up talking about that are actually your strengths, examples that you could provide as opposed to just copying this list. But those are all strengths, and that's an example of what that slide could look like. Interesting facts about you, like, I don't know, let's say that you put yourself through school 100% by working and didn't take any loans or didn't take any family loans or anything. That's an interesting fact. And that shows a lot of characteristic about you, especially if you're early in your career and you don't have that sales career to talk about. A fact about you, your personality, your personal experience, the path you've gone down in life that's a good place to put something like that. And at the end of a presentation you might give to a prospect, you might share a case study of somebody that you sold your product to. Here's where you put a case study of yourself, and you could insert the name of a previous employer, what your role was at that company, the dates of employment, a summary of your sales performance, any notable wins of deals closed, notable sales performance details, any experiences you gained. Maybe you learned something in a very positive way. Maybe you learned something through achieving something great. Maybe you learned something by something bad happening, but you could list that out here, any awards you won. And so that is your 90-day plan. Again, you could have that on PowerPoint slides. Ideally, they would be printed out. Maybe you could bind them together very professionally with a plastic clear cover, make it look as good as you can graphically. Then the last step here is you want to send a follow-up thank you email the day of your interview. Basically, as soon as you get back to your office or your home, you want to send this email. And I'm going to actually give you an email here. I think it's pretty good. You could probably copy it fairly closely, but the email is, "Hello, Mary. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today and for considering me for this great opportunity. Our conversation only reaffirmed my interest in this position, and this is exactly what I'm looking for at this point in my career." So this is you communicating that you're here for the long run. This is exactly what you're looking for, not even getting to whether or not you're the right person for them, although that's what we talk about next. I'm extremely confident that the fit is great between the requirements of the position and my background of skills and experience. I do not see any reason why I would not be extremely successful in this role and an asset to your team. Thank you again, and I look forward to possibly talking with you again and progressing to the next step in the process. All the best, and your first name, phone number, and email. Shoot that off right away. Again, you could probably tweak that a little bit for your situation, but that should be a good outline. And the key point here is of course, you want to send a thank you email right after the interview. All right, so that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's a lot there, but it's not real complicated. It really comes down to treat the interview like a sales call. So this is more important than ever because interviewing for a sales position, you want to ask a lot of questions. This is something that probably the average interviewee does not do. So I provided a process that you could copy exactly for that. Not only that you are perfect for the position, but that also that the position is perfect for you. Keep in mind, business owners and hiring managers, the most disruptive thing that they have to do is to hire someone. So when they're interviewing you, they're wanting to know, is this person going to be around for a long time? So you really want to not only paint the picture that you're perfect, but that they and their company and the position is perfect for you. And then you want to close hard. I showed you everything that you might need to do there. Trial close, hard close, 90-day plan, and whatnot. So, all right, so that's pretty much it for today. Hopefully there's been a few tips in here that you can take with you, and we would be very happy if any of these tips helped you to land a sales job that you're looking for. If you want to return the favor of any of those tips, very easy for you to do. Simply like, comment, share this video, subscribe to our channel. All or any of those help us tremendously, and none of those cost you anything. If you kind of like the way we kind of organize things here and the things we talk about, you may want to follow us on any of these social platforms. We post videos every morning in 30 to 60 second increments with a daily sales tip. So be sure to follow us here. And if you want any more information on SalesScripter or any other tips on selling, you can go to salescripter.com. You can contact us. There's a chat window. There's also tons of resources in terms of videos, ebooks, all sorts of stuff on salescripter.com. So thanks for being here. Hope this was helpful. We'll see you on the next training video. Take care. Have a great day.